Hello, my sweet friends. Welcome back to the podcast. As always, I am so thrilled to be here with you. If you are new to this podcast, hello, I am Dr. Vanessa Calderon, and I work with high functioning leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs in all professions to support you, if that's you, in elevating and aligning to your highest potential so that you are creating the results that you want in your career, in your business, and in your life, and that they align for your highest and greatest good. All right, today we are diving into a topic that I think is incredibly important, and that's why I'm bringing it to you. And it's the concept of self mastery. So, I'm giving you today a tool of self mastery, a tool of self awareness. And one of the reasons why I think that this is so important is because, I think all of us agree that self mastery matters as leaders, as creators, as entrepreneurs. For one, self mastery is essential for emotional regulation. As leaders or folks that are out forward facing, if we're content creators online, if we're entrepreneurs, we're facing pressures, we face conflict, and we constantly are dealing with uncertainty. Without self mastery or the ability for us to manage our thoughts and our emotions, we risk reacting impulsively or reacting out of fear rather than responding with intention. Self mastery also helps us build trust and create stability. People will gravitate towards leaders that are more grounded. Think about the leaders that you admire. What qualities do they hold? I was once being offered two positions around the same time. Both of them were absolutely fantastic, and I thought that they were both really exciting. And I was really on the fence about which one I should choose. And this is kind of fascinating, but one of the things that I took highly into consideration, obviously, was going to be who I was going to be working under, like who I was going to be directly reporting to. One of the boss, both of the folks were equally effective at their job, and from the outside looking in, great metrics, they were wonderful. However, one of the guys, they were both men, but one of the persons I would have been reporting to, he had more of the sense of like hyper urgency energy, like what's next, let's keep going, what else. And the other person, who's also incredibly effective, came off as a little bit more calmer, more grounded energy. And for me, when I was thinking about, well, who is it that I want to be reporting to? I chose the person that was more grounded. And that's ultimately the job that I took. So when you think about demonstrating that type of energy, that consistent, grounded behavior, that emotional control, guess what happens? Your teams feel safe, they feel supported, and they are more willing to take risks. And that one is really, really important. Self mastery, when you are a leader or an entrepreneur, allows you to take bigger risks as a team, and risks is what creates innovation. When they're thoughtful and they're calculated and they're smart, you want your team to be innovating and being creative. You don't want them to be afraid to take risks. The other reason why self mastery matters is that it helps with discipline and follow through. I've coached so many entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurship demands this sort of long-term vision and the discipline to follow through despite setbacks. And I've coached so many entrepreneurs who have fantastic ideas, but in the face of their very first setback, especially if they're transitioning from a high functioning career like a physician, or they were a lawyer and now they're going to start a business, the skills to become an entrepreneur are very different than the skills that it took us to follow a set path as a high achiever. And so at the face of the very first setback, they start doubting themselves or start creating narratives like this isn't going to work. And they slowly start to quit or pivot before they even have given their idea a fair shot. Self-mastery strengthens our habits, our focus, and our resilience over the long term so that we are more able to be disciplined with the things that we say we're going to do. And lastly, this is one of the reasons why I think it really matters, is that it breaks the unhelpful narratives that many of us carry around inadequacy and scarcity. Narratives like, I don't belong here, I'm not smart enough, I'm not a real leader, I'm never going to be successful. Narratives like that of inadequacy, but also narratives of scarcity, whether that's money scarcity or time scarcity. If you are able to create self-mastery, what you end up doing is you are able to release those narratives that are not of service to you. Self-mastery gives you awareness. It gives you self-awareness, and self-awareness is one of the biggest skills that any leader needs. One of my favorite Buddhist teachers, Thich Nhat Hanh, he has this quote, which I think is so beautiful. He says, awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they are transformed. Awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they are transformed. When your awareness shines on your teams are transformed. When your awareness shines on you, what you've been thinking and feeling, you're able to transform those things as well. All right, so the tool I'm going to teach you today is one I love to teach because it's simple, it's easy, and you can start using it right away. All right, I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to tell you where it came from, and then we're going to jump into some examples so that you can start using it for yourself. So the tool is called the cognitive thought model. Where did it originate from? So this model is very, very old. There's recorded written history of it from way back 300 BCE with the Stoics, but it's older than that. In fact, it's rooted in many ancient mystic traditions. The teachings, so the cognitive thought model, the basic teaching is that with your thoughts that you create, with your words you create. And even that concept, with your words you create, that's dated far back. In fact, the term you guys have all heard, like a magician say abracadabra. That word abracadabra is rooted way back to Mesopotamia, to Aramaic language, one of the oldest spoken languages. And it means, with my words, I create. With my words, I create. That is how old this concept of the cognitive thought model is. It was popularized in the Western world in the 1960s by Dr. Aaron Beck, who's a psychologist, when he developed what we now know as cognitive behavioral therapy. So the cognitive thought model is the foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy. So I'm going to teach you the cognitive thought model. Essentially what it is this. It asserts that some circumstance, which is something objective that happens outside of us, that circumstance causes us to have a thought. Okay, so a thought is subjective. It's something that we think. And that thought is essentially, what are we making that circumstance mean? Many of you may have heard that human beings we're meaning making creatures. That's what we like to do. What the human mind likes to do is it likes to make meaning of things. And that is exactly what our thoughts do. Our thoughts see something outside of us, objective, and we have a thought about it. We have a subjective thought about it. Now, that thought causes us to have a feeling, and a feeling is an electrical impulse caused by hormones and other neurotransmitters in our body, and that feeling creates a sensation in our body. But from that feeling, that's what drives all of our actions in the world. So we can have a feeling like feeling motivated and feeling excited, and those feelings propel us forward to take actions that, create intentional results. Or we can have feelings like sadness, feelings of like disappointment or shame. And those feelings paralyze us and keep us stuck. They do not create the results we want in the world. So as you can see, all of our actions create our results. So again, a circumstance, something happening outside of us, that's the C of the cognitive thought model, causes us to think a thought. The thought is subjective, what we make that circumstance mean. From there, that thought causes us to have a feeling, a sensation in our body, electrical impulse moving through our body. And that feeling is what drives all of our actions. So we can have feelings that propel us forward, like motivation, excitement, determination, or feelings that paralyze us and keep us stuck. Shame, disappointment, sadness, those types of things. And the actions create all of our results in the world. Now, this matters for a million different reasons, but one big one is that when we practice this tool of self-awareness or self-mastery, it leads us to see that when we are thinking intentionally, we create intentional results, because your thoughts tend to always end up in your results line. What you think will always end up in your results line. If I think, I decide to train for a marathon and I have a thought, I'm going to kill this marathon. I'm going to do so well. I'm going to PR. I'm feeling motivated, determined. My alarm goes off at 6 a.m. What action do I take? I get up, I go train for my marathon. What result do I create? I PR in the marathon. I have a personal record. I create another personal best. Now, the flip side of that could be I have a thought like, same circumstance, I'm running a marathon. I have a thought like, what in the world was I thinking? This is going to stink. I should not have done this. I have a feeling of fear, disappointment, anxiety. What do? My alarm goes off at 6 a.m. I turn off the alarm and I go back to bed. And what result does that create? I essentially defeat myself. I quit before I even started. So notice your thoughts will always end up in your results line. And this is why it's so important for us to see that intentional thoughts, when we can think thoughts on purpose, we create intentional results. We create thoughts on purpose. Without the self awareness, we usually are running based on unintentional thoughts, not thoughts that we think on purpose. And by default, we're creating unintentional results or results by default. Now, most folks, I will say, probably I'd venture to guess about 95% of the world's population is likely functioning without awareness or without this level of consciousness, which means they're living their life based on habitual subconscious patterns. So just thoughts that they've been thinking that they have not actually examined, and they're living their life by default. They might think something. I had a client who he would get very frustrated when things were inefficient, and he'd feel frustrated. And in my sessions, he'd say, I just feel so frustrated. And he's a leader of a big global team. And he would say, I don't know what to do about it. I just get frustrated when they do that. And when he was able to notice that he had agency over his thought and over his feeling, he has agency over that. He doesn't have to necessarily get frustrated because there's an efficiency. He could examine that. Holy smokes, everything shifted for him because he's like, whoa, I didn't realize I was in charge of how I felt. I was in charge of how I thought. I thought these things were just happening to me, that I was just feeling like that. That is a huge aha moment for him. So again, this matters because we do not want to live a life of default. We want to live a life on purpose. We want to lead our teams from a place of purpose, from a place of intention. And what we don't want is we don't want to continue to be in it's like the movie The Matrix, the Matrix where there's the blue pill and the red pill, right? I don't actually remember which pill is the one that gets you out of the matrix, but the whole point is that you live your life on default, or you take this pill and you open your eyes and you're like, holy smokes, I'm awake now. So when you are awake and you're out of the matrix, essentially what you're doing is you're choosing to pause your default brain and you're choosing to go to live consciously, to live with awareness. Now, what this is able to do for you is this allows you to notice that, again, you are in charge of your results in the world. You are in charge of all of your results in the world, your results in business, in your career, in your personal relationships, in your health. You are responsible. You have agency. You have choice. And that, my sweet friends, is a lot of power. There's this really famous quote. It's attributed to a Holocaust survivor and a psychiatrist, Dr. Viktor Frankl. And the quote is, between stimulus and response, there is a power to choose. No, that's not the quote. I'm telling you by memory because I love this quote so much. All right, let's do it again. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is your power to choose. And in your choice comes your freedom. Okay, so notice between stimulus and response, there is a space. That space right there, that is the space. That's your power to choose how you want to think about something, to choose how you want to feel about something before you take action. So between stimulus and response, there's a space. That's your power. And in that space is your power to choose how you choose to respond. That is incredibly powerful. Why that matters is because your outcomes in life will always be a function of two things. Whatever event life throws at you, so whatever event, that's your circumstance, that's the objective thing outside of you, and how you choose to R, okay, the letter R. Now, the letter R can be like most of us, we're walking around the planet, which is how we choose to react to whatever event life throws our way. But when you have self-mastery, self-awareness, when you're practicing tools similar to this cognitive thought model that I'm teaching you today, that our shifts, it's no longer how you instinctively react to whatever event life throws your way. It's how you respond, how you thoughtfully respond to whatever event life throws your way. And that is what we want. We want to be thoughtful about how we are responding because we want our outcomes to also be thoughtful and intentional. All right, let me give you an example of what this looks like in real life. And I will share an example from two of my clients. So, one of my clients is a big COO, a big global team, and his team didn't meet their quarterly goal. So, the objective circumstance. So, a circumstance is objective, okay? You can prove it in the court of law. It's objective. No one's going to argue against the circumstance. So, for example, let me give you an example of an objective circumstance. It's 75 degrees outside. That is objective versus it's hot outside or it's cold outside, because two people can have two very different experiences of 75 degrees. But the circumstance, the objective fact is that it's 75 degrees. And then the thought is it's hot or it's cold. Okay, you guys get that. All right, so their circumstance was the team didn't meet a quarterly goal. And his thought was, I'm a bad leader. And then he had another thought, I should have done more. I'm a bad leader, I should have done more. And when we walked this down and I said, well, how does that thought make you feel? I feel like I'm doubting myself. I feel ashamed. And those feelings caused him to take the types of actions like withdrawing from his team. He felt he had so much insecurity and felt like it was all his fault that he withdrew from his team. He avoided conversations about the performance. And guess what that did? That meant that his team they weren't able to meet, they weren't able to talk about what happened, they weren't able to get better, they weren't able to do evaluations. So him having a thought that he's a bad leader and he should have done more blocked him at the end. His end result was he wasn't present for his team to help them build them up again. And when we talked about this together, I said, isn't that so interesting that your thought is causing you to pull away from your team and prove to yourself that you are, in fact, a bad leader. Wow. He was like, oh, that's interesting. That caused him to feel curious. And I said, all right, let's go back. It's okay because you can always go back and choose a thought on purpose. So he chose to think, all right, this is an opportunity to learn how to better support my team. That was his new thought. That new thought, which I call an intentional thought, because you're thinking that thought on purpose, instead of the other thought, which I call an unintentional thought, because you're not thinking that on purpose. It's by default, just something your brain offers you. That new thought caused him to feel curious, caused him to feel responsible. And from curiosity, he started scheduling team check-ins. He asked a lot of good questions. He started giving them the resources that they needed to be successful. New result, next quarter, their team was supported and their performance improved. That is how this works in practice. It's really powerful for you to see, how am I thinking and feeling? Because maybe it's not giving me the results that I want. I'll give you one more example just to really nail this in there. And another client, she was a brand new leader in an organization, and she was a woman in an organization where there were all men. And she felt really insecure when she first took the job, which is why she came to me. And so here's the objective circumstance. She comes to me and says, we were in a meeting and there was a colleague who disagreed with me. And I said, okay, well, why is that a problem? And she said, because they're not respecting me. So she had a thought, they don't respect me. And I said, how does that thought make you feel? And she said, frustrated and angry. She was really pissed off. So what did you do? I asked her, what actions did you take when you were like that? She said, I became really passive aggressive. I stopped participating in the meeting. I wouldn't give that person eye contact. So what happened? What was the end result? The end result was that relationship just deteriorated. So going from a place of they don't respect me, that was her initial thought, her unintentional thought, led to an unintentional result of the relationship just breaking apart, proving to her, look, this person doesn't even care about me, right? Because she was proving to herself her initial thought. And when she saw that, she was like, that's so interesting. And so we had a conversation. Why else, tell me, like, why else do you think they may have disagreed with you? She said, maybe they just thought their idea was better. Maybe they were advocating for what their team needed. I was like, huh, that's interesting. How does that make you feel? And she said, the new feeling. So her new intentional thought is they're advocating for what they believe is best. Her new her new feeling was being open. So she started engaging in new actions like more dialogue, asking more open-ended questions. So tell me why you think that this is better. Oh, that's interesting. And what was the new result? She built a new relationship with this person of trust, of better collaboration, and they were able to continue to partner on projects moving forward. So again, those are two examples of how the cognitive thought model can work in practice. So how can you use it for yourself? I think that the best way to use it for yourself is for you to identify, where am I not getting the results that I want? Or where am I feeling like there's something inside of me that's blocking me? So if you are noticing you're having feelings of a feeling you don't enjoy, I feel frustrated when I talk to this person. I get angry. I get so annoyed, or I'm showing up in this executive leadership meeting and I'm not speaking up. So an outcome you don't like, or maybe a feeling you don't appreciate. And then you use the cognitive thought model for yourself. Fill it in for yourself. Maybe put in the outcome you don't like. I'm not participating in the leadership meeting. That's the result. And work backwards. So what does that look like when you don't participate? That's the result. If you're working backwards, what's the actions? I'm not speaking up. I'm not raising my hand. I don't sit in the front of the room. Why? What feelings are causing you to do that? This is actually coming from another one of my clients, this exact example. And the feeling was insecure. Why? The thought was, I don't belong here. Why? They were new to the executive team. So notice how that plays out. And I want you to do that for yourself. Where are you getting results that you don't like? Or where are you noticing feelings showing up for you that are not in service to what you want to create? This is a very, very, very simple and it's such a powerful tool. When I first learned this for myself many, many years ago, I would start writing this out for myself anywhere I could, on a piece of paper, on a napkin, on a receipt. And it's just more practices of awareness, cognitive awareness, cognitive awareness. And what that allows you to do is it pulls you outside of your thinking brain. And that is so important. One of the most important things for self-mastery is to know that you are not your thoughts. Just because your brain offers you something, or just because that thought was fleeting and now it's causing you to feel something in your body, doesn't make that thought true. Your feelings are your feelings, but that thought might not be true. And so you really want to investigate the thoughts that are not serving you, the thoughts giving you the results you don't want in life, unintentional thoughts, because what you don't want is to create unintentional results. All right, now that you have this tool, what are some things to watch out for? So every time I teach this tool to a new leader, one of my new clients, the same things always come up. They get so excited about it. They say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know this. Why didn't someone teach this to me 20 years ago? And then they want to use it to immediately change every thought that they have. So they have a thought of frustration. So what do I need to think instead? What do I need to think instead? Okay. So it is important. That's exactly what it's for. Think a thought on purpose. However, what you don't want to do is bypass what you're feeling. So the very first thing to watch out for is gaslighting. You don't want to gaslight yourself but use this tool to gaslight how you're feeling. Gaslighting is when we ignore what we're feeling, we tell ourselves it doesn't matter, or we are trying to bypass. So we don't want to do that. We want to feel our feelings. We want to feel our feelings. The first step of the answer isn't always, how do I change my thought, or what new thought do I need to think? The first step might be to acknowledge what you're feeling, especially if you want to change the feeling. If there's a feeling you have that you don't want, the very first step is to acknowledge that it's there. One of my favorite psychologists, Carl Jung, says, what you resist will persist. So if you have a feeling of frustration and you don't want it anymore, and you're trying to change it really fast by coming up with the new thought, what you're doing is resisting the feeling of frustration. Instead, what you want to do is create space for the frustration first. This doesn't take long, so it's not going to be miserable, but you just make space, you pause, and you say, okay, I'm feeling frustrated. Why am I feeling frustrated? Because I feel like this is so inefficient. That makes sense. Of course it makes sense. All right. From there, that's it. Just make space for a few minutes. Notice that it's there. You want to give it airtime because your feelings are valid. And what you don't want to do is to invalidate how you feel by using the cognitive thought model. So that's really, really important. You never want to do that because I think that there's a big problem with what we've been sort of collectively taught in our culture, which is resilience or wellness equates to always being positive all the time. But that is absolutely not true. That's bananas because resilience doesn't mean positivity. No, resilience is the ability to bounce back from difficult situations. That's resilience. And if there were no difficult situations, there would be no such thing as resilience. So if you are creating self-mastery and you are practicing resilience, wow, that's what we want. That is an incredible skill to have, the skill to be resilient and be able to bounce back when things are hard. That requires things to be hard. And most of the things that are hard are things that we need to process, like our emotions. So this is an incredible tool for emotional resilience when you give your emotions the air times that they need. It's not a long time, but it's long enough for you to see them, process them, make space for them, and then move on. All right, the other thing, let me see if there's anything else here. Oh, yes. What you also don't want to do with this tool, and I've seen this once, I've had some clients that, oh my gosh, they see this tool and they're like, oh my gosh. And then they start taking personal responsibility for everything they think and feel. And then when they have a significant other, this is usually what happens, a significant other or somebody that they manage or lead is having a negative feeling, like this is unfair, then they're saying, I'm not doing anything that's wrong. It's how you think about it. You need to change your thoughts. Now, that right there is something that I want you all to watch out for, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to use this tool to excuse you from having your own personal responsibility to be out of integrity. You get to be a person of integrity. And if someone doesn't like it when you're being a person of integrity, okay. But if you're out of integrity, then you need to take personal responsibility and apologize. It's not about them having to change their thoughts about anything. All right. Again, this is a tool of self-mastery, which will improve the way you lead, the way you create in the world. If you're a leader or an entrepreneur, it gives you the ability to create from a place of intention. Intentional results come from intentional thoughts. And what we don't want is the opposite. We don't want to live a life on default based on unintentional thoughts. And all it takes is a quick second to pause. And for those of you that think, oh my gosh, how would I even do this? It's so hard. It does take effort. That's true. It does take a little bit of effort in the beginning because before this tool, most of us haven't paused to think about why we're thinking what we're thinking. After this tool, we give ourselves the gift of a pause, an examination of what we're thinking, and then we choose, do I want to continue to think this? All right, sweet friends, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would love for you to share it with a friend. Leave us a review, a rating. If you're listening to this where there are no reviews, maybe there's a comment space, leave a comment. I respond to those comments. Leave us a review. That's how other people find the podcast. So I'd really appreciate it if you shared this with your friends. All right, sweet friends, I will see you all next week. Adios.